Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special town hall meeting for PETA's Leadership Council. I hope you can hear me all right. Thanks very much for joining us today. I know it's short notice, but I think you'll find it's worth it. We'll be trying to hold these telephone conferences whenever there's some significant development or some big breaking investigation that we want to brief you on. And this really is a big one. It's all about a new milestone for animals in laboratories. This is one that PETA scientists helped make possible. So after you hear what we have to say, if you have any questions about this tremendous news, actually while we're talking, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them. All you do, if you have a question, is it's very easy. You just press 0 on your phone, and then a PETA staffer will jot down your question and then reinsert you into the call so that you can ask us directly yourself at the end. Well, some of you have already heard this, but last week we revealed a historic decision by the Dutch government, which will actually make Holland the very first country in the world to begin a phase-out of all animal experiments, all of them. So Holland's goal is that it wants to replace every single animal experiment with human-relevant, animal-free testing methods by 2025. Sounds like a long way away, but it's a big job of work. So what that means, of course, is that in about 8 years, a little bit more, if they succeed with this, which we hope they will, no animals will any longer be poisoned or burned or cut up and killed in Dutch laboratories. And of course, that's just the best news in the world. What I want to tell you is it isn't just a victory for the somewhere around 500,000 animals who we estimate are suffering in those laboratories every day of every year, but it's also a very solid validation of all the work that's being done by our gifted PETA scientists, not only in the U.S., and they chipped in, but in Europe, and they are right now on the front lines helping with this. What they do is work with other scientists, they work with regulators, they work with other animal advocates all over the place, around the world, and through their work they promote this use of these innovative, state-of-the-art non-animal methods. And of course that saves lives, and it also moves us closer to the day when animals won't ever be stuck in a lab cage. They won't be scared and they won't be hurting, and somebody won't be about to open the door and do something to them. What happened, in a nutshell, was that at the request of Dutch officials, our PETA scientists provided detailed evidence that in many areas of scientific study where animals are most commonly used, and that includes heart disease and cancer, high blood pressure, addiction, and even forensics research, there are sophisticated non-animal methods that are already approved and available, and reliable non-animal methods that are being developed as we speak tonight. And that development of those non-animal methods is a process that we are constantly pushing to speed up. So what we're hoping is that this news will compel regulators and governments in other nations to ignore all those tired excuses we get from experimenters, the ones they hear on Capitol Hill and so on. People saying, oh, it's always been done that way. It's tradition to them, and they feel comfortable stopping it. We need to stop seeing animals as little more than test tubes with whiskers in our National Institutes of Health and these other agencies. And we need to persuade those people that animal-free research like that the Dutch government is now embracing is the way to go. It's the way of the future. So that's it in a nutshell. But for more background on this fantastic news, I'm going to turn you over to two people now who have been intimately involved with this. Jessica Sandler is our Vice President of Regulatory Testing, and Kathy Guillermo is our Senior Vice President for Laboratory Investigations. You may know them. They are both stalwarts in this historic fight. I'm going to let them let me off the hook, and they will explain how PETA's work helped make this dream come true. And they'll tell you what PETA's doing and what our hope is of getting other countries to follow the Netherlands' lead and also start phasing out animal experiments, which is a high bar. So over to you, Jessica, if you will.
Excuse me. Thank you, Ingrid. Hello, everybody. Last week's announcement probably came as a surprise to many in the animal experimentation industry, and maybe even to those in the animal rights community. But for myself and others in PETA's regulatory testing department, it's a milestone that comes after many years of pushing for the use of effective animal-free research methods. I know that the science behind some of what we've helped accomplish in Holland can seem a bit daunting, so I'd like to give you a few details to help fill in the gaps on why this news is such a game changer. I should probably first explain that there are two types of experiments on animals, those that are required by law and those that aren't. Holland's request for assistance addressed both types of these experiments. Examples of non-required testing include medical research, university research, and curiosity research, such as, let's sew this kitten's eyes shut, rotate her in a drum, and drop her into a vat of water, and say that there is a connection to sudden infant death syndrome. Or, let's use dogs to study erectile dysfunction in humans. These are both real examples, by the way. And the answer to many of these types of experiments is for us to force the experimenter or the sponsors or the funders to just end them. But then there are the tests that government regulatory agencies require be conducted, such as when the EPA requires testing on industrial chemicals, or the Food and Drug Administration requires testing on drugs, vaccines, and medical devices. These tests have to be replaced with specific non-animal methods and strategies, and that's where PETA's regulatory testing department comes in. No animal organization puts as much hard science into replacing these required tests. Our work to end these experiments is enhanced by the PETA International Science Consortium, which we incorporated in 2012 to coordinate the scientific and regulatory expertise of the PETA affiliates. The consortium champions the development and implementation of the best non-animal research methods in order to end animal experiments. I will talk about PETA and the consortium. I will actually talk about how PETA and the consortium are keeping animals from suffering in deadly tests. But first, Kathy is going to share with you details on how PETA scientists helped make that momentous announcement by the Netherlands possible. Over to you,
Thanks,
Kathy.
Jess. Thank you. First, let me just give you a little bit of background because, of course, it didn't start last month, although it may sound that way. Last summer, one of the Dutch political parties called for the government there to take a look into phasing out experiments on primates in the Netherlands. And after contacting the politician behind that effort, PETA Netherlands learned that the other two political parties opposed the effort. So we issued an action alert throughout Europe calling for the closure of the primate facility. That alert exploded on social media, and on the eve of the planned vote on the experiments last December, PETA Netherlands delivered a petition that was signed by more than 100,000 caring people to the Dutch Parliament. This brought us to the negotiating table with all of the political parties, and when we got there, we could make our case. It took a few months before the measure passed, but it did pass, and a new era really began right then. Europe's largest primate laboratory, the Biomedical Primate Research Center, a really hideous facility in the Netherlands that imprisons more than 1,300 monkeys, was told to phase out all experiments and shut down. And as a result of that and our efforts in that, PETA earned the right to stay at the table in further discussions on replacing all animal experiments. So while the news coming out of the Netherlands was certainly a milestone, 2016 is looking like it will be a landmark year in all of our work to stop deadly experiments. So more on this in a bit. Before Jessica tells us more, please remember you can press 0 at any time today to ask a question, and we'll take that from you live a little bit later in the call. And I'll turn it over to Jessica quickly.
Thank you, Kathy. So, as I mentioned earlier, the PETA International Science Consortium is a team of currently 15 scientists who are spread across 3 continents and who are changing the face of regulatory testing. We are funding non-animal testing methods, conducting in-person training sessions for scientists and regulators. We are publishing articles in respected scholarly journals. We're presenting work at international scientific conferences, and we're briefing members of Congress. Just 2 weeks ago on Capitol Hill, we showcased animal-free research laboratories whose sophisticated work can replace animal use. And just to give you a few specific examples of our work, our nanotoxicology expert is leading an international project to develop non-animal tests that can be used to predict human lung reactions to nanomaterials and other substances. And we had more than 500 participants from all over the globe in our recent webinar series on animal-free methods to determine the toxicity of inhaled substances, including chemicals, pesticides, and tobacco. Our work is now a recognized and vital part of the global scientific community. In fact, Dr. Klippinger, who is the Associate Director of the Science Consortium and the Director of the Regulatory Testing Department, now serves as President of the In Vitro and Alternative Methods Specialty Section of the International Society of Toxicology. This is the first time that someone from an animal rights background has ever held such a position. This past year, our scientists convinced the Canadian government to end deadly year-long experiments in which dogs are forced to eat pesticide-laced food or to inhale pesticide fumes every day before being killed and dissected. We were also successful in getting the U.S. government to take concrete steps to dramatically reduce the number of animals required to be used in pesticide testing here. With help from our scientists, PETA India convinced that country to stop requiring that drugs be retested on animals after they had already been tested and approved in other countries, a single change that will save tens of thousands of animals there every year. And you've probably all seen images of the horrific Draize tests in which rabbits are restrained as chemicals are dripped into their eyes or smeared onto their sensitive skin without pain relief. Late this summer, we were also able to convince the Indian government to accept the use of readily available non-animal methods to replace the use of rabbits in these hideous tests. We had already succeeded in doing that, obviously, here in the U.S. and over in Europe. So that is yet another terrific success story. And back here at home, after years of work by PETA scientists, you probably heard that this past spring, the President signed into law the Frank Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act. This is a vital piece of legislation that is going to modernize chemical toxicity testing in America and end many painful and ineffective tests that would otherwise have killed tens of thousands of animals. And finally, just last month, after PETA scientists submitted comments on a Food and Drug Administration proposal that would require that thousands of animals be used to test 19 ingredients in antibacterial soaps. These are the soaps that you go to the supermarket to buy. Their labels say that they will kill germs on your hands or in your kitchen. The FDA agreed that these products are neither safe nor more effective than using plain soap and water, and as many as 9,000 animals will not be used to test these substances. So I'm going to turn things back to Kathy with another quick reminder that we'll be taking your questions a bit later. Simply press 0 on your phone if you have a question to get that started. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. PETA is the only animal group that works on all areas of animal experimentation, from university laboratory to the testing facilities of Fortune 100 chemical companies. We've closed laboratories and we've ended studies, like the hideous U.S. government maternal deprivation studies. And I'm sure you saw our video showing the baby monkeys who were taken from their mothers at birth and were tormented to become mentally ill. We closed the terrible cat laboratory at the University of Wisconsin and the really shockingly abusive dog and cat laboratory in North Carolina, PLRS, which was shut down entirely. We've ended the use of animals for trauma surgery in 19 countries around the world through the donation of state-of-the-art simulators, and that program's ongoing. We're just in negotiations with Kenya today. We exposed China's animal testing requirements for cosmetics, and we funded the very first training for Chinese scientists on the use of non-animal tests. And, I could go on, but I just really want you to know this. For us, the bottom line is that not only do we expose cruelty in laboratories, we end it. And one of the easiest ways to see the impact we've had on the global animal testing community is to look how quickly progress was made in the Netherlands. So back to that story. Following the victory in phasing out primate experiments, PETA was invited by the Dutch government to help design a strategy with the goal of phasing out all experiments in the Netherlands by 2025, all animal experiments, I should qualify. So in September, 2 PETA scientists took part in a special meeting to help, and we were the only international animal group at this meeting, and following that, our scientists in the UK and US compiled a 70-page document identifying 25 areas of animal experimentation that can be ended immediately or very soon, as well as a strategy for phasing out all animal use. Our evidence really made a powerful case that continued experiments not only cause tremendous animal suffering, but they actually impede progress in addressing diseases like cardiovascular issues, cancer, diabetes, mental health issues, and many other serious health concerns. We know that PETA's role in this process can help make the new Dutch goal of phasing out all animal experiments in a little more than 8 years a reality. We believe that when it's implemented, it will also serve as a powerful example to Europe and to other countries around the world, and millions of animals will be spared terrible lives and death in laboratory as a result.
Yeah,
I'll turn it back to Ingrid.
Thank you, Kathy. That's all very inspiring, and it inspires me. I sit at my desk every day doing a million other things, and when I think of the work that's being done by our scientists and by you and by Jessica, it's extremely encouraging. Just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, just press 0 on your phone, and you can ask that question personally directly. I'd also just like to say that it's been so difficult in India, but we have succeeded. We have managed to get our scientists onto various committees there, and it's amazing what has been accomplished. I don't know if you remember, the very first thing that I think we did was rescue dozens and dozens and dozens of beagles who were illegally flown into the country and were going off to be poisoned in a lab in the Indian interior. And we got a tip-off and were actually able to get a minister to go down there and intercede to stop this. And that was really the beginning of the work in India. And then we did manage to get people onto the committees, and we started to change all the testing requirements. And now, of course, as Kathy said, we're looking very strongly at China, because there are all sorts of shenanigans going on there. It's not just killing dogs for meat and the other horrible things they do with animals in the circus. It's also that they are using animals in medical training, things that we've obliterated in this country. You can have somebody at Harvard who learns about surgery but never touches an animal in the course of their training. So we're now doing that with China. Anyway, let me take a couple of questions immediately. Don't want to run out of time here. The first is Bill. Bill, you're on the line. Please let me have your question.
Yes, Ingrid. I was just wondering if there are any other countries like the Netherlands that have plans to phase out completely animal testing within a reasonable amount of time.
No, Bill. I mean, this is such a breakthrough. It's such a monumental step forward. It really has taken great courage, and they're going to have to go up against the establishment and the laboratories. They're going to have to be massive changes. It's going to affect everybody, including those who provide the food and the cages and the animal technicians who are on a career track, everything, which is why 2025 is pretty ambitious, but we believe it can be done. Of course, we're always optimists, but we do believe it can be done. I think what the rest of the world will be doing is looking to see how it pans out in the Netherlands. And then I do believe, as all our people do, that the various alternatives that we're helping provide and that we're also helping develop, because, you know, we give money to develop these alternatives too, are going to be in play in such a major way in such a country that's being progressive that probably first other European countries will look to it. Maybe we'll get some of our work in India doing well, and we'll just go from there. So I hope that gives you hope rather than worry.
Certainly does, right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill, so much. And Mary Kaplan, I haven't heard from you in a month of Sundays. Is that truly you, Mary?
Hi, Ingrid. I just want to tell you how proud I am to hear this tonight, because when we met in the 1980s when the Silver Springs monkeys were moved to Louisiana, I didn't think this would be possible in my lifetime, and you've done it. And I cannot tell you how proud I am, and I've waited all of these years, and to know that you've made this progress in my lifetime just gives me great joy. Thank you so much.
Oh, Mary, it's fabulous to hear your voice. It takes me back. I don't know where the time goes, but it was 1981 when we broke open the very first lab that had ever been exposed in the United States, served the very first search warrant that removed all those monkeys, those macaques, and took the very first court case all the way up to the Supreme Court in trying to save them. And in the end, we stopped those experiments, all but two. At the very end of their lives, two of the monkeys were actually anesthetized, which they wouldn't have been done if we hadn't been there, and operated on. But all the rest went to safety. They were put back together again instead of in those small cages. We got a conviction of the experimenter. For those of you who don't go back that far, it was the very first conviction in the United States of an experimenter for cruelty to animals. And it really shook everything up. But I think the experimenters hoped it would be a one-off and that everybody would disappear back into the woodwork. And we've never stopped, never ever stopped. We've been going strong, finding ways, looking for legal avenues, protests, campaigns, petitions, going to the government, you name it. And Mary's right, persistence pays. And for that I thank all our members who have signed those action alerts and fueled our fires and kept us going so strong over the years. So it's terrific, and Mary, don't you disappear. I want to speak to you again and again. Let's just take a quick call from Bob. Is that you, Bob Clark? Bob, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Ingrid. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And my comments are very similar to the previous questioners. I think I want to first of all say congratulations to Kathy and Jessica and all of the teams and people that have been involved in this. Justin, it is work that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. So I join the previous questioner in congratulating you. My questions are really, what can we do to broaden the understanding about the non-animal testing methods that are available across the world? And I'm worried that Holland has to stand alone, and I'm wondering if we could identify a couple of other countries who we think have the potential to do what Holland is doing, to get a couple more countries to make that sort of commitment over the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I think I'm going to ask Kathy, well, let me start with Jessica, because Jessica's people are at these conferences and what have you with poster sessions. If you can tell us, please, Jessica, some of the many ways that we're getting the word out, particularly in the science community and to young scientists.
Sure, Ingrid. So as you know, I love to hire PhDs. because, even though I'm not a PhD, because PhDs, when you go into a meeting with scientists, whether it's industry scientists or regulator scientists, there's such a hurdle that we used to have to get over. But when you go in with a PhD who can speak the language that these people are speaking, you instantly start with more respect there. And the change that we've seen in the time that I've been with PETA in 18 years is really remarkable, where we used to go in and it would be confrontational and somewhat hostile, and companies, for example, wouldn't meet with us on their territory. They would set up a hotel room for us to meet in. They wouldn't allow us onto their campuses. And now we are literally invited everywhere. So you have scientists from the regulatory testing department being invited to co-sponsor international workshops with the very government agencies that we used to butt heads against constantly. And this is not because we have, backed down in our demands. It's because these government agencies have really started to recognize that what we've been claiming all along is actually what needs to happen. I don't know if that went off in a tangent or answered.
No, Jessica, that was perfect. We're going to have to wrap it up. I don't know where the time goes. As I said to Mary, we don't know where the years go now. I don't know where the minutes go. But there's much, much more to say. Please stay tuned to the website, everybody. Thank you so much for listening today and for sitting in on this. We are, as I mentioned, all of us feel the same way. We are grateful for all your support, and we very much look forward to sharing more news about our work with you. It may not be as grand as this. This is a monumentous occasion, but we will have victories. We have them every week. And we look forward to letting you know about the progress we're making on all sorts of different fronts, not just animal experimentation, which is key, but in other important areas, things we're doing to stop animal abuse. Without you, we are nothing. So with that, I thank you again, and I wish you all a good night. Good night.